Hi to everyone. Welcome to the 11th episode of Open Lecture Series FinTech for Everyone, which is by ICRIPEX Financial Technology Master's Program at Bahçeşehir University. So, in this episode, we have a very valuable guest, Burak Tamaç. Hi, Burak, how are you?
Hi, Bora Hocam. How are you?
Fine, thanks. So Burak is actually now at Bitcoin conference in Miami. So we will both discuss about the recent events at Bitcoin conference. What are the headlines there? But tonight we have a quite a recent headline. The minutes of Fed meeting in March, they are just published. So there are some hidden information there which we will discuss tonight, and we will also try to interpret what's going on in the markets, why the reactions, why the crypto markets are like this. Is there a correlation between the Nasdaq as usual, or what's going on in general? Burak, if you wish, we can start with the very recent, like for us, it is approximately half an hour news. Let's discuss about this Fed minutes. What do you think? What's your interpretation? Maybe we can also share the screen to present the news here. Let's start with this, Burak.
Of course. So we all knew that the the balance sheet, the reduction of the balance sheet, shrinking the balance sheet by Fed would be the biggest thing that we were looking today's in minutes, because we knew that Fed actually first announced that or gave a hint about that the minutes of December meeting. So we got that news on I think 5th of January, that in the minutes that all of a sudden no one was expecting it, on top of on top of the interesting raising the interest rate, Fed actually implied that they might also start reducing the balance sheet. That's actually very aggressive if you think about the back then in January, but they appointed January meeting. Sorry, July meeting for starting reducing the balance sheet. So everybody knew that increasing the rates would start in March and then May, and then obviously it will go on. And then after a couple of interest rate hikes, the reduction of the balance sheet would start in as early as June, maybe July, and then it will continue. But they were also expecting the CPI would peak at the end of first quarter, basically in March, and then come down. So that was actually the point there, starting in July. But what happened is that because of the energy crisis, Ukraine and Russia geopolitical crisis, that was something unexpected. And instead of we seeing the peak in CPI in March, now we are expecting CPI 12th of this month would would come around 8.3%. So 8.3% is so high for American standard. Is obviously would be the highest in the last 40, 50 years, as again. But this is something not expected. This is the key here, because CPI to go high over 7 and then peak in March was expected, but then they expected it would go down. But now it's keep going and going and going higher. This is a big risk here. For this reason, Fed decided to move the date for reducing the shrinking the balance sheet from July supposedly to May. May in this today's minutes we learned that they will consider it and explain it to staff like it will start in May. And the size of shrinking is also very critical here. 95 billion dollars, 60 billion from treasuries, and 35 billion comes from mortgage-backed securities. This is also very aggressive, though, I have to say. So we can all see that what's happening is that in 6 months ago, approximately, there was a clear picture about the inflation would peak in the first quarter and then go down, and that would coincide with the interest rates and then shrinking the balance sheet. This story based on the predictable inflation numbers. But if as expected, the next week CPI number comes about over 3, which is expected right now, forecasted, that actually proves the point that Fed had to take more aggressive steps to fight the inflation. So there are two sides of this issue. Or one side is that if you become so aggressive, there's a risk of putting economy into recession, because also the yield curve inversion already happened. And the other side is that if you not do that aggressive, you might lose control of inflation. Inflation can basically go out of control. So which one they have to put emphasis, we didn't know, but we now guess that Fed and the government too, they both weighed more on the inflation, fighting against inflation, than risking the recession. They're basically taking more risk to put in the recession, which is also like, there's election in November. So we also saw the narrative changing in the States too, because they put more weight on fighting against inflation, is that Biden administration will take control of the inflation for the cost of putting economy into recession. Did I say it right? Inflation and recession. So we will see what happens. But we also saw, Borojam, yesterday, one of the Fed governors, I think, mentioned what was going to come today. This
Reinhardt.
was Reinhardt mentioned that the reducing the balance sheet would start in May. And another thing I forgot, today's meeting minutes, that we learned that many chair members of the Fed not approved, but like sided with the 50 basis point increase in the rate in May. So when I checked yesterday, the probability in the market CME futures was like 71%. I haven't checked today. I'm sure it will be probably over 90% right now. That is also unexpected, and also taking another like aggressive step to fight inflation.
So many thanks, Burak. So I will also give a couple of interpretation of what's happening. For a long time, so Fed officials were approaching the inflation problem like it is not a big deal. It is transitionary. It is temporary. I mean, we are controlling it. We are looking for it. So don't worry, don't worry. So this was the phase. This has changed. And they realized that, okay, so especially with the root cause of the supply issues. So we have an inflation here. So this is also different than the previous inflationary periods of the world. Why? Because in the previous years, the main source of inflation was actually the demand. But here in pandemics, it has first started with demand, but now it is more oriented the supplier side of the markets. So which means this is by definition cannot be as temporary and as easy to control like the demand oriented inflation. So here we have supply side oriented inflation. So for me, which is surprising is this, it is kind of an acceptance by Fed that we made a mistake. Because as also the headlines from Bloomberg suggests, we are now expecting a kind of rushy moment for increasing interest rates, as also at the same time shrinking balance. So it wasn't planned. And even Reinhardt, which is not one of the most hawkish members of Fed, so he declared that we need to do that urgently. which signals that inflation is rising and might be out of control, which is, of course, the least desired thing for all economies. And we have also another issue for the Europe side and also developing countries. This is another thing because not every country has the flexibility to increase the interest rates, shifting from uh, shifting to contractionary monetary policies as Fed, because as you have mentioned, the unemployment rate, the recession risk level is actually more dramatic in European side, in also developing countries and Turkey. So Fed is doing two things at the same time. First, accepting their mistake in a sense that, okay, we were late, this inflation is not temporary, it might be out of control, so we need to have the contractionary monetary policy in a harsher way. So starting a 50 base point increase rate by May, accompanied with immediately, as you have mentioned, not starting by July, but starting by May, shrinking the balance by $95 million per month, which is also a very huge number. So this is, in many senses, I think, interesting. And as you have already also mentioned, as also it is noted here, it looks like even in March meeting, it was the plan to increase the rate by 50 base point, but due to the Russia's invasion of Ukraine and uncertainty in the markets, they didn't want to start that. But it looks like we will for a while live with inflationary economies worldwide around us, which is, of course, bad news, actually a very bad news for all the global welfare. And adding this also the Ukraine issue, Russia issue, many countries are discussing about actually banning the movement of capital, which is contrary to the globalization era. So many also political scientists discuss about that, or maybe we are a paradigm shift here. Maybe we will not see more promotion of globalization, but now the capital movements might be restricted, capital movements might be controlled, which is just against the, of course, the freedom of the movement of capital. So saying all of these, how would you interpret the reaction of the markets to this news, including, of course, crypto? We see, again, not a surprising high correlation. Do you agree with this? Will this correlation continue, or maybe at some point, since by definition, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are by design supposed to be a hedge mechanism against inflation, will we see that there will be a kind of separation of crypto markets in terms of its movement from the other markets, correct?
I believe that in the long term, only Bitcoin will provide, because of all the features that he has, the hedge against inflation.
Sorry for the joke, but you are in Miami Bitcoin conference, so is this
Yes.
the reason why you are saying just
No,
Bitcoin will be different?
For the inflation hedge, obviously, because of the scarcity, because of the supply cap, all of that. But for the correlation with the markets in the basically Nasdaq and S&P, in the long term, we will definitely see more other crypto currencies would be more correlated, because they are not like promoting or promising anything against inflation, hedge against inflation, but they're like technological startups. They will be obviously affected by the money supply. But besides that, obviously, in times like this, like days like this, when we hear big news about the macroeconomic sides, like Fed meeting, CPI, or the minutes released today, those are the dates actually Bitcoin also correlates with the Nasdaq, especially very, very highly, unless there's another narrative that's going on outside of the macroeconomy. I would like to add one more thing about the transition, the narrative of the inflation and how it got out of control. So if because of the supply chain, everything you explained, John, but if you just increase the prices, that would not that would not actually mean that the inflation will go out of control, even if it goes like let's say 8%, 9%, 10% by itself. What makes Fed and everyone really like nervous right now, besides this, income level also going up. So this actually creates a spiral. Spiral is this, very simply, I'm explaining. I live in the States. Unemployment rate is extremely low right now, and there's a labor shortage. So I have a leverage that I can use annually or 6 months when I want to raise from the company I work for. I can say, look, there's 8% inflation right now. I want an 8% increase. I wouldn't be able to say this 3 years ago, 2 years ago, if the inflation was back, but because the unemployment was not that low and there was no labor shortage, I would have lose my job probably. But now it's very hard to find qualified employees in every single industry in the States, so that this actually causes incomes increase too. So prices going up, income going up, and then now this is the critical point, because like prices are not rejected by the people, but they're compensated by the higher wages, and this creates the spiral, which is exactly what happened in 1970s and 80s. That's how it got out of control. The reason that Fed is getting really aggressive right now, we have seen this dramatic increase in the incomes in the last couple of months. That was not the case before second, third, and fourth quarter of 2021. That's why Fed always said this is transitory because the high prices will be rejected, etc., etc. But they were not rejected. People got higher wages right now, and we can afford it. People can afford more. This is the critical point, and obviously on top of the CPI, everything, we will also like closely monitor the income levels, how they are like high increasing, etc. And as a last note, I can say I'm in the Bitcoin conference here. This is the first day in Miami, and it's going to be 3 days, very big names conferences, and we are expecting a couple big announcements here. One of them, Jack Mullers from Strike, he actually said that he's going to have a big announcement tomorrow or the next day. Here we don't know what it is, but when he announced it, he always like posted videos about Steve Jobs, Apple, all of that, think different. So there's a speculation that Jack Mullers could announce something that Strike, which is using the Lightning Network and Bitcoin ecosystem, obviously, and they might. Jack Mullers is the going up, Jam, a little bit, and the second row on the left with the hat. So is one of the youngest CEOs. So he might announce that Apple Pay integrates Bitcoin and Lightning payments. We don't know, but obviously it's a Bitcoin conference. There's going to be always good news coming here.
Well, many thanks, Burak. I see that according to this, day one is the industry day. Then, yes, day two, the second and third days will be the main conference. Maybe we can briefly, okay, see the agenda here. It is a bit, okay, so here it looks like, yes, there will be lots of nice events here. Of course, we will be in touch, and maybe we can finalize by answering Ozan's question. Can we say cryptocurrencies and other risky elements have a potential dump scenario if this shrinking balance sheet policy does not change? Let me start with my comment. I don't think that, Ozan, of course, the risk premium and the risk preferences will react to these news. We already see the red screens today for crypto markets, but I think it will take some time. Then people realize that these are all happening due to the not temporary inflation scenario. So we are living high inflation in almost all of the countries in the world. And although the interest rates are rising, still the difference, which means inflation minus interest rates. So we are all in negative real interest rates in the majority countries of the world, which means for storing of the value of assets, so the cryptocurrencies, they can have quite a potential room for these capital movements. We will have volatility for sure, but in the medium run, I think as long as we have negative real interest rates, even afterwards, since the trust level is kind of distorted by the citizens, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies will have some room for from all of these, I believe. Well, what's your answer for this question, Burak?
Similar to your your emphasis with the difference between the inflation and the rate. So right now in the dot plot table that the released last month, we know that the top, the ceiling of in the long term interest rate predicted by Fed is 2.5%. That's the medium one. So think about it. The top will be 2.5%. Will the inflation come down, let's say 3% or 2.5%, like that level in the next 2 or 3 years? I don't believe so. But if you believe that, if anyone believes that, obviously that would create taking people, that would actually like cause people taking less risk and then leaving basically like move their money from cryptocurrencies, even the indexes, Nasdaq, all of that too, and put it in a more safe treasuries, like basically or money market, like 2 or 3%. But I don't think that's going to happen. So in the short term, obviously there will be huge volatilities. This is the nature of the cryptocurrencies, obviously, and I'm not going to say unfortunately, because this is the cost you pay to gain more gains in the long term. There's no free lunch, so our cost is the cost we pay for Bitcoin and other currencies too is the high volatility, and this is the cost we pay to gain more in the long term. Is
Well,
there another
many
question?
thanks. Yeah, I think this is it, and we might be a bit out of time. So many thanks for all of your interpretations and comments. And please enjoy Miami and the Bitcoin conference for all of us. Looking
Thank,
forward to seeing you in another week. Many thanks, Burak.
thank you so much for inviting me. I'll be happy to join in others the FinTech for Everyone videos in the future. I really enjoy it.
With pleasure. We are looking forward to seeing you again. And many thanks to our audience for all the questions and comments. Cheers. Bye.